This is what they heard in far-off France.
My mother was in Richwood, but she went to Charleston to have me because there was only one doctor in Richwood and evidently not very good. And so I was born in Charleston, West Virginia. And my earliest memories, I guess my mother would sing World War I songs to me. Katie, beautiful Katie, and all the songs from World War. She would sit and hold me and sing those World War I songs. My mother was Zelda Sylvia Cohen. Profession-wise, she graduated from the Mason School of Music in Charleston, West Virginia, and was a lovely pianist. My father was a veteran of World War I. He was 13 years older than my mother. Doting father. I could get away with anything. But we had a department store in Richwood, West Virginia. My mother worked in the store with my father. We were the only Jewish family in town. Fairly observant, as much as you can be in a little town like that. But every Christmas, he would play Santa Claus in the store and have a Christmas tree in the store. But before Christmas Eve, they would drag the Christmas tree home, put it in the house, and he would put on his Santa Claus suit, and I would lie in the bedroom, and he would come down through the skylight while I was shaking and waiting for Santa Claus. They did that for me because all the other kids had Christmas. And even though we celebrated Hanukkah, that was what he did for me so that I wouldn't be that different, I suppose. My mother was one of the original single mothers, you might say. My father died when she was just shy of her 30th birthday in 1935. He suffered from depression and unfortunately took his own life and is buried at Arlington Cemetery. In fact, I have a telegram the day of his funeral. Every merchant in Richwood closed their store for the day of his funeral. And my mother, they sent her a telegram with the names of all the merchants listed, that closed their stores. So we were very well thought of. I was 9 and my brother was 16 months old. And you cannot be a single mother by teaching music. So she went back to secretarial school. We moved from Richwood, West Virginia to Charleston, where she went back to school, and then to Washington, D.C., where she started working for the government. My grandmother, Bubby, she came to live with us. She was obviously a widow by then. And when my mother went to work, she practically raised my brother because he was, just a toddler. And so Bubby had a big impact on our lives. The Breakstone family were originally from Russia. They were dairy farmers in Russia. So when they came to this country, they knew what they were doing. Now, we call them the cheesy Breakstones. And my grandfather was a cousin. He was not in the dairy business. He was a merchant. My maternal grandfather died when I was a year old, so I have no memory of him. I'm named after my grandmother who died in childbirth when my father was born. My grandfather was a young man left with a newborn infant. He hired Dora Levinson to take care of the baby. He married her, and they had 6 more children together. But since she had raised him from birth, he was, she couldn't have, it was like her child. My grandmother, Bubby, she was born in Riga. She was a city girl, very well educated. Her father and her 2 brothers came to the United States first, and then she and her mother and sister left Riga, stayed in England for a year before they could get to this country, and she was about 14 when she came to the United States. My mother had 2 brothers. One died as an infant. The other one, Uncle Julius, he played what he called the fiddle. was a violinist, played with the Detroit Symphony, also played in dance bands, very versatile. On my father's side, I was very close with all the aunts and my uncle there, particularly my Aunt Bibby, Elizabeth, who never had children, and I was always like her child. I mean, she just, I was the only grandchild on both sides of the family for 7 years, so I had it made. My brother Marty, who I absolutely adore, he's 8.5 years younger than I am. He lives in the Maryland suburbs now, he and his wife, and they have 2 children. He and I are like doppelgangers, not in looks, but in thought. And I know when my sister-in-law says when we're together, it's like having 2 Martys because we finish each other's sentences. And I mean, he's just a doll. He's a dentist. We're retired now. Growing up, he was a real pain. We have the story of the pedometer. He had ordered a pedometer. He was maybe 7 or 8 years old. And it came, and I said, "Can I borrow your pedometer?" And he said, "No." And so I took it and threw it on the floor. And I guess when he was in his 40s, I finally replaced it and sent him a pedometer. That's kind of a family story we all laugh about. But I taught him to sing and to dance, and I remember he used to run around, "I'm a ding-dong daddy from Dumas," because he was like a toy to me, like a baby doll. But as we grew older, we became very close. And like I said, I just adore him. In Richwood, we lived over the store. We had a department store, and there was a long porch that ran the whole length of the building, and it was a big building. And like I said, we lived upstairs, and we would hang over the porch and spit on the people on the sidewalk and get spanked for that. And my friends and they loved coming up there with me. My best friend there was Nora Pauline, and then there was Patty Hinkle and Billy White. We all had 2 names. I was always Marilyn Ray. I was a tomboy, and it was a nice life. I mean, I had everything I needed. I was spoiled rotten. And it was a great childhood. I mean, I wore overalls. We could be gone all day up in the mountains, climbing, dipping our feet in the mountain springs. I mean, we were just free to go. There was a lumber yard there. You could go anywhere. We'd go to the lumber yard. I mean, they'd have these big saws and everything. Nobody bothered us. And we'd climb up the lumber stacks that were like 2 stories high, and then climb down inside and eat lunch. We'd take a lunch with us. There was a paper mill. We used to hang around the paper mill. There was a tannery. If you could get past the smell, we would go to the tannery. I mean, we were just free to roam. Like I said, we'd leave after breakfast and come home for dinner. And we were little. I mean, we were I was 9 when my father died, so all this was before I was 9 years old. It was wonderful. It was great. My father was big about bringing home stray animals. Cats and birds and things like that. Just a good guy. He did fly fishing, and I remember he would come home with speckled trout, and my mother would, usually Sunday morning, we'd have speckled trout, and I don't eat fish today, but that always tasted good. He was a hunter, which was really surprising. He would hunt rabbit, and he was a good cook. He would make Hassenpfeffer. But we kept chickens in the back, and he couldn't kill the chickens because he fed them. So he'd give a kid 10 cents to kill the chicken for him so we could have chicken. I just remember those Sunday morning breakfasts mostly. My father did a lot of the cooking. I mean, he enjoyed cooking, as does my brother. And oh gosh, I remember the old coal stove where you had the thing that you took the plate off, and we kept coal in the basement. And they would have, the coal thing, I forget what you call it. Scuttle, was it? I don't know. And you'd have to fill it. And then when we got the first gas stove, it was like we were in the century. So that was a big deal. We used to take car trips. I remember the Luray Caverns in Virginia. Or we'd go to, drive to Washington to see my paternal grandparents and aunts and uncles. We went to, I remember one summer we went to Virginia Beach. Another time we used to spend some time up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan because one of my father's sisters lived in Petoskey, which was not the UP, but we would go up to Mackinac Island and the Grand Hotel, which is still there, and they don't make them like that anymore. My father was born in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, Groundhog Place, and Tom Mix, the Western actor, I don't know if you know the name or not, probably not, but he was also from Punxsutawney, and so we used to go to the Westerns, the movies on Saturday. Every Saturday we'd go to the Westerns, and there was one movie theater in Richwood. But, media wasn't a big deal. The newspaper we got was the Charleston Gazette. There was a little Richwood paper that came out once a week. Radio, that was all there was radio. Old serials. The one I do remember was we were already living in Charleston, I think, at the time, and that was Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. It scared the hell out of everybody because they thought we were being invaded by Martians. I do remember listening to that, but not being impressed. I mean, we all knew, we were smart enough to know. But I've got a picture of my mother and Bubby and me sitting by this huge radio, cabinet radio, and listening to the radio. When we lived in Richwood, we would always go into Charleston for Passover because I had so many cousins and aunts, great aunts and great uncles who lived there, and I liked Passover. We would always try to get together with family even after we moved to when we finally moved to Charleston. It was easier. We were right there. And in Washington, of course, when we moved to Washington, my paternal grandparents the Breakstone family were not big on religion, but they, observed the holidays. I went through the fourth grade in Richwood, and then 5, 6, and 7 in Charleston, 8, 9, and 10 in Washington, and 11 and 12 in Miami. Like I said, I was all over the place. School, I was a good student. I was a straight A student except for math. Mrs. Domer, and actually she was a math teacher, but every morning we would come in and she would have a different line of poetry on the blackboard. It had nothing to do with math. And I became enamored of Oscar Wilde through her and wanted to read more, and whatever she had, it was interesting, and some of us would pursue it. So she was a big influence. I was 9, we left Richwood, moved to Charleston. Lived there 3 years, moved to Washington. Lived there 3 years, moved to Miami. I never knew where I was going to be. It was traumatic because I had lost my father, and then I left all my friends, and every 3 years I was leaving another batch, going to a different school in a different city, always the new girl. I had a reputation, particularly in high school, of being stuck up. I wasn't, I was just shy because, I started fresh every time. And I think it had a bigger impact than my mother ever knew, I think. I just liked school. I was not big on extracurricular. First of all, I never had time, although in Charleston, I was in the drama club. And I was in a play, and the drama teacher said, next year I would definitely want you, to be in the drama club. Of course, next year I wasn't there anymore. By that time we had moved to Washington, and I tried out for it was not the Glee Club, they called it the Chorus Club. And you had to try out, and the teacher said, do you take voice lessons? And I said, no, and she said, well, you should. And I'm thinking, sure, that's all my mother has to worry about. But anyway, she took me anyway. And I remember the one show I was in was The Mikado. I was one of the three little girls from school, are we? That kind of thing. By the time I got to Miami in the last 2 years, I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get through. I was the kind of kid who didn't have to do the testing at the end of the year because if you made certain grades, you didn't have to do it. Like I said, the only thing I didn't understand at all was math, but I managed to get B and never took anything further than geometry, and still got a B and didn't have a clue. I also worked after school. I worked for the Jewish Floridian, the newspaper in Florida. The owner at that time was Freddie Shockett, and he came to one of our BBYO meetings and asked if anybody would like a job after school. Yeah, and so I did work there. Well, that's always a family favorite story. We used to go to 14th Street Beach in Miami. That was the hangout. And I did some modeling for Miami Publicity. Hank Meyer was the, I guess, the advertising tourist bureau for Miami, and I did some modeling on the beach. And I was on 14th Street Beach, and I had seen Al Signer, but he was with an older crowd. He was almost 6 years older. He was 5 years and 8 months older than I was. And one day I was just sitting on the beach with some kids, and he came over and said, "What's your name, little girl?" And I said, "None of your business." But anyway, we struck up a conversation, and he asked me out for the 4th of July, and I was dating somebody else who was working down at the Keys, no big deal. And he had said he couldn't get back for the 4th. So I accepted the date. And then about a week later, this fellow from the Key, from Miami, working down, he said, "Guess what, I can come back." And I said, "Gee, I've already got a date." He said, "Well, just break it. You've never been out with him." I said, "I hate to do that. It's a holiday." Had I broken that date, my whole life would have been different. I mean, obviously would have never asked me out again, and it wouldn't have happened. And I was 16. This was July. I was going to be 17 in September. And that was it. That was literally it. I was impressed because he was older and fit. I mean, he used to work out and, and he was ready to settle down. Of course, I was young, and when he found out how young I was, he almost broke it off. And then one of his friends said, "Look, if you like her, it's silly, just hang in there." So he was actually at my high school graduation. And then he went into service. He was in what was then called the 3rd Army Air Corps. And the September that I was 17, I was 18, we got engaged, and we were married the following February. My girlfriend Muriel was a maid of honor. My paternal grandfather, walked me down the aisle. I did not wear a wedding gown, wore a turquoise dress. My mother-in-law was horrified that I was not wearing the wedding gown. It wasn't her call, it was mine. And it was just nice. My old boyfriend was one of the hoop holders. he was in the Navy at the time. And it was just a nice day. It was, you're so involved in what's going on that you're kind of outside looking in. I think with most big occasions, it's, you're kind of a bystander watching yourself. It was hard to find a place to live then. Not long after we moved here, we were actually living in veterans housing, veteran subsidized housing, on the wrong side of the tracks. Now it's low-income housing, but at that time it was for veterans. And at that time, there were a lot of places that had signs, no Jews. And even though my husband was in uniform, didn't make any difference. I mean, it was but we found a duplex. And we really ate a lot of spaghetti. The Polk Shopper, which was a shopping guide, we worked very hard. We brought it up from nothing, and it was good to us. The business was good to us. Lakeland was very good to us, and but we also did printing for outside printing and things like that. And I guess the high spot of that was we started out with mimeograph. If you don't think that was fun, trying to duplicate the inside of a refrigerator with a stylus. But then we were able to buy offset press. My husband went up to, I forget where, somewhere near Chicago, and bought an offset press, and that was a whole new starting point. And that was because I said to him, what's going to happen if anything happens to you? How am I going to pay for this? So he took out a life insurance policy until the press was paid off, so that if anything happened to him, God forbid, the press would be taken care of. But my husband was he was a visionary. He would take chances. I mean, he just felt like you had to take chances. You know, we didn't take a honeymoon until our son was about 16, 12, maybe a year and a half old. And then we took off 3 weeks and just drove. Our philosophy was, I guess, that if we didn't have a sense of humor, we'd have killed each other, pretty much. I mean, you know, I was young. I mean, I had never, you know, I went from my mother's house to, and when I told my mother that we had wanted to set a date and get married, and she said, okay, and I said, well, don't you think I'm too young? And she said, because I'm looking, you know, I'm thinking, why aren't you giving me an argument? And she said, yes, but she said, it won't matter because you're going to do what you want anyway. I worked with my husband, and we had some rough times, and particularly when we went into advertising and publishing, we were busy all the time. And our time off was usually after Christmas. We wouldn't publish that week, and we would take off and just either drive up north, or we would go up to, or we'd take, you know, day trips to places like Ocala, where he graduated from high school in Ocala. We'd go there to Silver Springs, and, you know, or we'd go over to St. Pete Beach, you know, just for a weekend for a couple of days. But we couldn't do a lot of big traveling because we were tied down trying to make a living. We were able to retire at a young age. We retired in 1973. And then, of course, once we retired, then we tried to make up some travel time. And, you know, we did some overseas traveling. And then we got into German Shepherds. We'd always had them as pets, and he decided he wanted to start showing. So then all our travels were dog shows. And then after that, he said, well, let's try some breeding. Well, we were living in a house nearby here, and, you know, we couldn't do it there. So we bought this property and tore down the house that was here. I have a kennel building out there. And we started breeding and showing German Shepherds, which was very satisfying and a lot of fun. Delivered lots of litters of puppies. Most marriages are worth fighting for, and you do hit some bumpy spots, and, you know, you disagree about something, get yourself over it. You know, what do they say? You got a problem, build a bridge, get over it, you know. I had every intention of being a medical technician, and I was going to go to the University of Maryland and do that. How, I don't know, because I can't stand the sight of anybody else's blood but mine, but I was going to do that. In the meantime, along came Al, and we got married, and I had a baby, and that took care of that. Arnie was born in Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami, and Mona was born here in Lakeland. I was pregnant with Mona when we moved here. Arnold is a lot like I am, sort of, you know, que sera, sera. He's a wonderful son. He calls me every single day. Now, what could we possibly have to say? He says it's just to make sure I answer the phone. He was very bright, very smart, got a scholarship to Emory University. Was only there 2 years before he was accepted into podiatry school. In the meantime, he was already going with Susan. I couldn't ask for a better daughter-in-law. I mean, she's like a daughter to me. Her mother died shortly after they were married. She'd been quite ill, and I think that, I never tried to take her mother's place, obviously, but I think it made a difference in her relationship with me. Mona is my husband personified, type A, driven, also very smart. She is the executive director of the National Residency Match Program. When the kids graduate from med school, she matches them up with their residency. She travels all over the world speaking. Mona is married to Robert McCann. They both met when they were with the American Hospital Association in Chicago. My grandchildren are, of course, perfect. Arnie has 3, Greg and Abby and Joy. And Mona has 2, Scott and Laura. They're just fabulous. Greg is just like my husband, very ambitious. He hated school, which my husband did too, but made up for it in ambition and hard work. And he graduated from Florida State. He's very caring. He calls me, he's there for me. A great guy. Abby is typical Libra, also very bright girl, but interested in what's fair. A great mother. She was a teacher, but then became a stay-at-home mom. And beautiful girl. Joy, she's got the greatest personality. She's a beautiful girl, absolutely gorgeous girl. But she can have you rolling. She can tell stories that with just some you can't repeat. She's just really fun to be with. Scott is very smart, terrific mathematician, wonderful father, great husband. He's quick with an answer. My husband used to say, one of these days somebody's going to punch you out because you're going to speak before you think. And he teaches at a Hebrew Academy. When they had the baby, one of the parents came over to him and didn't realize he was Jewish, and said, well, as our people say, Mazel Tov. And he said, well, isn't that a coincidence? My people say the same thing. He comes up with things like that are just hysterical. Laura is very, very dear to me. They all are, but Laura and I have a special bond because we share a physical problem that she and I can talk about that the rest of the family can't. Very driven also. She and her brother Scott both graduated from Northwestern. She sang in an a cappella group there, and she also sings in an adult a cappella group now. She's got a magnificent singing voice, absolutely beautiful voice, and a beautiful girl. The great-grandchildren are really an extra bonus. I have 5 now. The oldest one is 17, and the youngest one will be 9 months this month. They're all good kids. They really are. They're all different. Completely different, personality-wise. The little ones are just amazing. One of them, Molly, last year she was in the Maccabi games. She's a soccer player, and her team won silver medal. And her brother is very active in AZA, and he went to the APAC convention, and he's all into that. And then my grandson, his daughter is very artistic, musically and photography-wise. She won the state contest for photography several years back, and she plays drums and marimba. And then the next little one he'll be 6 next month. And then the newest one, Eva, is, of course, she's the baby. I guess my family is my passion. Although I have wonderful friends here, unfortunately, most of them are gone. My very dearest friend here, Helene Slackman, died several years ago, and her family was like family. And when my husband died, once my family was gone, I had my friends here, and it does make it easier. And I'm not. There's a younger group here that are now in their 60s and some are early 70s, who really look after me. They call to make sure I'm okay, and I keep saying, why do you want to talk? We don't consider you old. We enjoy being with you. We enjoy talking to you, listening to you. And my children love it because it kind of relieves them of some of the burden that that Linda and Tammy and Jane and Lysandra look after me. I'm mentioning their names on purpose. Hobbies, well, I love tennis. Used to be an avid reader. Haven't got the patience anymore. I play mahjong, love mahjong. I mean, it's not the most important thing in my life, but I enjoy it. I love to travel when my husband was alive, and that was fun. I enjoyed it. Pet peeves. Well, I have no patience. In some ways I've mellowed with age, but I can't stand people who jabber and have nothing to say. Like I said, I guess I always say I'm old, tired, and cranky. And of course, my grandson Scott said you're describing half the people in Florida, but which is probably true. The best thing that ever happened to me, well, aside from being born, you think? Well, it's a toss-up. Everybody would usually say getting married, having your first child, your first grandchild, your first great-grandchild. I think the best thing that ever happened to me really is my life. I mean, I like my life, and I think I'm doing well. I'm cognizant. I'm pretty much, as the doctors say, aware times 4. I've got a bazillion things wrong with me physically, but the doctors always say, "Oh, you are doing so well," and I think, seriously, because I know where I am. So I think my life in general. I mean, there've been low points, obviously. Losing my husband, like I told my children, I said, your life will go on and it'll be fine, but my life will never be the same. A lot of it was just me. I know my doctor said, he was a family friend, and he said, you're depressed. I think you ought to take an antidepressant. And I said, listen, I am entitled to be depressed. My husband just died. I said, Al just died. I don't need an antidepressant. I'll get over it. I'll get through it. You don't get over it, but you get through it. The life lesson is, please just get along with each other, love each other, overlook things. Nobody's perfect. That's my greatest wish, is that my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will just love each other. No, I'm looking forward to more great-grandchildren. It drives me crazy that I am now looking through the rearview mirror, and the road is short in front of me. And I think I've been very fortunate. Nobody in my family has ever lived to be this age. The oldest was my paternal grandfather, who was 84, and my maternal grandmother was 83, so I'm it. My legacy are my children, my grandchildren. That's my legacy. And I hope that I've set a good example for them. I think I have. I think they enjoy being with me. It's not a chore. I hope I'm right. I'm talking to you guys. I think they really, it's not something that they have to do. I know at my 90th birthday party, my brother told his kids that this was a command performance. This was not an option. Of course they came. They all got up and spoke, and everybody had something completely different themes altogether. And it was just a joy. And I think they know, because there aren't many of their friends at their age. I mean, my oldest grandson's 47, that still have grandparents. So they're lucky to have me, and I'm certainly lucky to have them. That would be, I'm leaving wonderful people. I'm very pleased with my life. I wish I didn't feel so crappy most of the time, but that's the way it is when you get old. But, I'm sorry that, life is short now. Even in the rearview mirror, though, the view is good, because when I look back, it's a good view.